Hi, welcome to the Retirement Railroad. I'm Steve, and today we want to go back and look at our update for the month of June 2021. A lot of things aren't visible. Doesn't mean we didn't get things accomplished. The addition of moving the computer, my main computer, back out to the train room and getting it hooked up to JMRI allowed me to also utilize the far superior graphics capability of this computer as compared to the Surface Pro I was using previously. This allowed me to utilize my Minicam software, which allows for multiple cameras and transitioning from one camera to another, and it really makes these updates and the tips of the day much easier. With a click of a button, I simply do that, and now you're getting to see 4 different cameras. In addition to this, because of its superior graphics capability, I was able to add more powered USB switches, which allow for more cameras. All right, and I now have the ability to put cameras all around the layout and be able to switch from one to another and literally follow trains around. So I'm in the process of acquiring some more cameras. I got one inbound, should be here today or tomorrow. Currently have 5. These 4 plus the cell phone, the iPhone camera, also hooks up to this software. So that's kind of exciting. It also makes not only easier for the videos, updates, and tips of the day, it makes it much more enjoyable and a whole lot less editing that has to be done. So that was the major project for June, getting those up and running. The other thing we did was right over here at my workbench, I added the false top that you can see right here on this camera. All right, that sits over the workbench and test tracks, and will eventually incorporate a village or town scene. Also on that, as you can also see on that false top, I've added another set of Atlas HO, actually 2 sets of these Atlas HO station platforms to match, and I got them weathered and everything, to match the other side. So the Aurora station now is complete on both sides. I still have some detailed parts and figures to add to this side platform, but just as an indication for you, you can see how. And there's a light connection plug that I can unplug because the station platform here is lit. And here is the false top for the workbench. We'll stick her back in line here. Drops into place, hook the light power back up. All right. And we're back in business. So, between the computer, the video capabilities, I also got Sound Loader hooked up where I was able to modify the sound files on a lot of my locomotives and get them upgraded. There's a tip of the day, JMRI tip of the day on that as well. And so, it's been a busy month, just not in scenery or track work, things that you're used to seeing on monthly updates from me. Much more infrastructure type of situation. I was able to pick up on eBay a Proto 2000 CB&Q Burlington route GP7 Blackbird, and that's what you see going around the layout right now. Okay, that was one of the more challenging projects as far as locomotives that I've had. When I purchased it off of eBay, it was purchased for parts. I wanted a Blackbird, which is that paint scheme that the Burlington used for its switcher. The GP7 is what they call the road switcher, whereas like an SW series would be a yard switcher. And as a young boy, I used to see these GP7s and GP9 road switchers all the time in my hometown of Downers Grove, switching out some of the different industries, Heinz Lumber, Pepperidge Farm Bakery, etc. So I've wanted one, was able to pick up this Proto 2000, again, listed for as is for parts. All right, so let's take a closer look at it as soon as I find my controller. All right, let's back her back up. And there she is. Okay. There she is right there. And when I say it was challenging, because it was for parts, it did not run when I got it. And upon further investigation, there were parts of it that you have to look close, and I'll bring it up to the camera. But if you look right there under Zephyrs, above the yellow and red stripe, right there, see that? The plastic is melted. That's the actual motor. All right. What had happened was the motor had shorted out. The original motor, and it was no good. So I replaced the motor. I already had a Athearn motor, and I was able to replace the motors. Now the flywheel sizes were different, so I had to change out the flywheels, and the shaft size for the motor was different. Okay, and what that meant was I had to mill out the Athearn motor shaft was slightly larger in diameter, so I had to mill out the flywheels, but not too much, so it still had a tight fit where it would grab hold without an issue. And as such, the yokes, the plastic yokes that the drive train or drive shaft hooked to was also too small, and I had to mill that out to fit on the larger shaft of the motor on both ends. Okay. So I got that done, and with the shafts not hooked up, the motor ran perfect. Okay. So that problem was solved. But as soon as I hooked up the shafts, guess what? It wouldn't run. Well, Athearns and Proto 2000s are notorious for cracked gears, all right, axle gears. All right, I don't have any, I already threw them away. But between these wheels, underneath this cover, between the wheels, all right, under the cover is the axle, and on that axle is a gear. Okay, and over time they will crack. They're fairly easy to replace. You simply, on the crack gears, the wheels will come off no problem. You may have to mill out the gear, the axle gear itself a little bit to get the two wheels, which are on independent axles, back in. And it's critical that you have a wheel gauge, an NMRA wheel gauge, because if you put those wheels in too far, the axles, they're separate. One is for one polarity of power, the other side's for another polarity of power. And if you put those in too far into that axle gear, they will short out and it still won't run. Okay, so get the gauging right. Again, it's easy to do. You just have to make sure you do it correctly. Okay. But anyway, once I replaced all 4 axle gears, put her back together, she runs like a top. Right. Granted, I have the slight little areas with the melted frame. I did have to put a decoder and a sound bug, basically 2 decoders, one function control, one for the functions, and one for the one for motor control, one for sound. That you have to mill out. Dremel tool is your best friend there. You have to mill out the large weight that these Proto 2000s come with to be able to accept those boards. But once you get those done, you know, and back running, she runs like a top. I did upgrade her sound file as well. Most Digitrack's chips come with, decoders come with a default GP38 sound file. They don't have a GP7 sound file, so I dropped in a GP10 sound file into that one. All right, and used a Sugar Cube speaker on it. So we did get that done. All right. What I want to do now is we're not only going to run trains, okay, we're going to go back and look at the last year, because June of 2021 marks 1 full year of the Retirement Railroad on YouTube. I actually started the planning process for the railroad in late April through the month of May, and actually started construction early June 2020. And so we're going to go back and look at that. And one of the other things I'm going to start doing for my monthly updates is I'm going to take a specific train and give a little history about it. So here for June, in our inaugural episode of named trains, so to speak, we're going to look at Union Pacific's City of Los Angeles, which ran between, go figure, Los Angeles and Chicago. Now the Union Pacific did not have tracks feeding in to Chicago. All right, they could get as far as Omaha. Right? That's as far east as the Union Pacific back in the 60s. Tracks went. What they did do was get trackage rights with the Chicago Northwestern. Right? So they went from Omaha across central Iowa, just north of Des Moines through Ames, over to Clinton, Iowa, and across northern Illinois, Rochelle, up through there, and across the western suburbs, they call it the Evanston subdivision, into the northern tracks of Union Station. Okay? So we'll take a look at my interpretation of the city of Los Angeles. So, along with a montage, so to speak, of the 1 year build thus far on the Retirement Railroad. So stay tuned. All right, so I started planning the Retirement Railroad in late April of 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I always had the dream of modeling the suburban Chicago CB&Q Burlington route. And so I looked up online some planning software, and the only one I saw was, and I know there's others and they're better, but the only one I saw was the Atlas track planning software. So that's what I utilized, and as you see here, this is as far as I can get on the free version. So with that, I went ahead and bought the software and came up with this general track plan to begin with. And there are things about it I liked, things about it I didn't like, but this fulfilled my dream of a full layout room, and it's on our enclosed patio, or lanai. And the red block you see in the center is the Union Station. But this really didn't have exactly what I wanted. I have numerous doors and all windows, which precludes anywhere near doing a multi-level layout, so I'm restricted to a single level, and really nowhere to hang benchwork on walls. So I came up with another alternative to hanging benchwork, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. But right here, you get the idea. So let's move on to the third generation of the track plan. And you'll see the Union Station changed, and I added a roundhouse, a turntable and roundhouse in, because I've always wanted one of those. But this really didn't suit what I wanted either. Alright, so we went to the next generation, and I changed the yard up here in Chicago. The big red blob being Union Station. Alright, and the station sits above, one level above the track work, just like Union Station did in Chicago. And where the yellow tracks are, that is the Van Buren Street yard and station, which sits underneath and between Grant Park on the Lake Shore and Michigan Avenue and downtown Chicago. So basically what you see there is skipping all of downtown Chicago, but with a scenic divide between the two. And from there, I took it one reiteration further, and I did some changes to the yard and the turntable roundhouse. And I moved the turntable roundhouse up here and did some other slight changes. And for the most part, this is the track plan. Okay. Yeah, I didn't connect everything up and do all that nice stuff, and everything doesn't look pretty. But it's at this point I began construction. All right. So that's kind of the history of the rough track plan. So once track planning was completed, late April, early May, I went ahead and ordered some cabinets, kitchen cabinets, for this room. And my thought process there was, I had this desk, I had filing cabinets that I almost had to still have in here, and I needed storage areas as well. And because it's a patio, I wanted to make sure that everything was up off the floor. Now I could have put in some shelving type units, etc., but I wanted something that once completed and I could stain it, would look pretty good. So I opted for kitchen cabinets. I ordered those in May, and they arrived late May, early June, where I could start on the laying the track, etc. So now let's go ahead and look at a video of the evolution of the retirement railroad, and basically from May of 2020 through the end of June 2021. All right, here we go. So let me switch over to it. All right, so first thing I do, in May was I was unpacking my 50-plus-year-old collection of HO rolling stock. All right, and getting it all out. The pricing on some of the stuff was fun to look at, and I'm just going through this real quick, not to dwell on anything in particular. There's the desk I mentioned, and the files are off to the right. I had all this stuff up on some shelving. There was the cabinets in the beginning of the top of the benchwork. All right, and first kit I bought was the Union Station, which is basically modeled after a Union Station, I believe, in Denver. But again, I'm proto representative, not prototypical. So I utilize that because it has similar architecture to Chicago's Union Station, and so that is kind of the building, the anchor building, so to speak, eventually. It'll have an interior with a sunken area down below, and the interior will look much like what you see in Kevin Costner and Sean Connery's Untouchables, all right, in that famous scene. Filmed at Union Station, by the way. All right. Here I am laying out the track and bench work, tops, and Union Station, and laid in the sunken area, the track, in my first attempts at ballasting, and I learned very early on, I'm not very good at ballasting. I've gotten better, but I'm still not very good. All right. You got a glimpse there of my workbench, which eventually will be the dispatcher's area for running operations. We'll talk more about that as we go. There's test tracks there. You'll see my Surface Pro, which originally I set up for JMRI and my cameras, but it doesn't have the graphics capability or the processing oomph necessary. So I did bring ultimately in June of 2021, and you'll see bring back the main computer. All right, there you see the Central Valley Model Works 2-track truss, 200-foot truss bridge that I spent all of August working on, and had to do some kit bashing on it because it's made for code 83 rail. I model in code 100, so I had to file down the rail flanges, and so that they'd fit in the grooves between the plastic ties that have to be smashed. Thousands of them. I don't know if it's thousands, but it's definitely hundreds. Smashed over that flange to hold it in place. It's the toughest model kit I have built, but also the most rewarding. By September, we had the loop done with both bridges, Walther Swing Bridge and the Central Valley Model 200-foot truss, done and spanning the opening for the back door. And the first train making the loop was the Chicago Blackhawk, Burlington's overnight train that ran between Chicago's Union Station and the Twin Cities, Minneapolis-St. Paul. Right? And it's a group of heavyweight cars being pulled by a Proto 2000 E89 that I eventually ruined or got near to ruining by running it off of the layout. And many of you have seen that video, and I'm not going to dwell on that. It's in numerous of my videos you can go back and take a look at. Here's a cab ride around the layout. I really like cab ride videos, just because it gives a perspective as if you're riding either in a locomotive or if tilted off to the side like you're riding in a passenger train, which I did through much of my childhood, from Chicago up into Michigan to the Quad Cities, and of course between suburban Downers Grove and downtown Chicago on the commuter trains a lot. In fact, in my later years in high school, we used to take the train downtown, take the L, which is the elevated lines from Chicago to downtown Chicago up to Wrigley Field, and watch the afternoon games, come back. And the tough part of that was I was cutting school, doing it, me and my buddies, a lot my senior year. And by that time I was already locked into college and everything, so it wasn't a big deal in actuality. However, that train ride back home, I had to be on the same train as my dad without being seen. Okay, now mostly different cars, but on one occasion we were on the same car, but he didn't see me, so it wasn't until some years later over an adult beverage that he learned of that story. And of course, even at that age, I was well in my 30s, maybe even 40s by that point, he was not pleased. Anyway, here I'm working on my first kit scratch build. Okay, not kit, a scratch build, utilizing blocks of wood 1x6s laminated together and cut to shape, with holes drilled through for a threaded rod to go through 2-inch PVC and held together, nuts and washers, to represent a grain elevator. Okay, and I painted it the block of wood initially, but it got all scuffed up in the process of building it. You know what? I left it, right? Because it made it look really weathered. And the silos the same way. There you see it in place. The top I have eventually covered in sheet plastic. And by October 2020, there's the Lockport Industrial District taking shape with the quarry, the refinery, and the grain elevator. And then, of course, the area where the bridges span, there's a lift-out section representing the harbor. Okay, and that river represents the Cal-Sag, Splains rivers that connected the Port of Chicago at the Calumet Harbor down to the Illinois River, which in turn connected the Mississippi and gave a through passage for barge traffic all the way from Chicago to the Gulf of Mexico, and utilizing the intercoastal canals, all along the coast, east coast of the Gulf and east coast of the United States. By November 2020, Lockport Industrial is taking shape, and then in December I moved on to Berwyn Cicero and utilizing my old 1960s Revell 2-stall engine shed, and also the Walters Bakery kit representing Pepperidge Farm Bakery, and it's actually a pretty close representation, and the Heinz Lumberyard. Okay, now these weren't that close in reality, but it is representative, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. Not prototypical, just proto-representative. In December, we also added some new lighting to the room, which was really dark. It's so dark that the layout lighting on a photocell, you turn those lights off during midday, and it's dark enough in this room for the layout lighting to come on. Okay, there's the Lockport Industrial and the harbor scene, and off to the left you'll see the packing plant and Chicago stockyards. All right, and my koi pond through the door window represents Lake Michigan. At least that's what I tell everybody. All right. I'll eventually have a removable backdrop in front of that door window. Little Fleming Foods truck at the packing plant. I worked for Fleming for over 20 years. There you have the stockyards, and it wraps around to the back side of that packing plant as well. I got a Christmas Village fountain with fiber optic lighting to represent Buckingham Fountain on Chicago's lakefront. Again, Berwyn Cicero, Heinz Lumber, and Downers Grove Fairview with Pepperidge Farm Bakery. And you'll see in the back there some bi-level commuter cars. Start working on the rock face there, and again, Illinois and northern Illinois is basically all limestone, and so utilizing acoustic tiles, a trick I learned back in the 60s and 70s, makes for very good representation of limestone, particularly the federal quarry there in Vulcan Material Plant, gravel plant. There I'm running my early representation of UP is the city of Los Angeles. Okay, and I eventually finished out that train with some more Athearn HO scale UP streamline. And there we have a bi-level commuter train being pulled by an E7. I really like run-bys and rail fanning the layout. I just think it's what I get a lot of enjoyment out of. And with digital photography and video now, that's something I didn't have as a kid. Boy, that is probably one of the most enjoyable things for me to be able to do is run by videos and camera lens. Again, back to you have in the lower portion, the north end of Union Station, up above it, Berwyn Cicero engine yard. January was the month of redos and e-units. I ended up redoing this loop because I had all kinds of issues along the back side there because it was very hard for me to get to initially. And so I did a prefab on that long section of plywood, cut out the old and dropped that in, and basically have not had any issues since. I also added a crossover switch in the lower left that you just off screen now. And I started on the swing down bridge. Right there you can see the prefab on the crossover. There's a conduit, a gray conduit underneath that sliding door that runs power, Loconet cable, USB cable, Ethernet cable, all to be able to connect that next expansion project between the two sliding glass doors so that I can, right there, and underneath the desk will be the farm scene. Here I'm starting to work on the Van Buren Street yard and station. I do have my 47-inch TV there that will be able to project JMRI's Panel Pro and utilizing a mouse pointer, be able to throw switches without having to use the throttle to do so. Plus it'll show what the current state of the switches are. In January, I knew I needed about 2 more e-units. And there were some good deals on eBay at the time, and I made offers hoping to get 2 e-units. I ended up getting 5. Every one of my offers was accepted. So I've gone ahead and put 3 in the service. I still have 2 that I don't have decoders in that I will eventually. So let's run some more trains for a little bit. And here you see that the city of Los Angeles has all of its Union Pacific cars now, Streamline cars. And now time for a quick cab ride lap, looking back as we go. Great Lakes and Lockport Industrial there. See the approach to Union Station north side. Come out by the south, go underground for just a tad bit. And this next area will eventually be the farm scene right there and under there. And the turntable and roundhouse out in Aurora. Well, actually, Eola. It's Aurora. Loop back around through the farm scene again. And we come into Fairview, Downers Grove Fairview with the Heinz Lumber and Pepperidge Farm Bakery. Going through a Chicago Park District to Berwyn Cicero and through underneath Grant Park and Van Buren Street Station and Yard. Passing by the Chicago Stockyards and Meat Plant and through the harbor back into Lockport Industrial. Now here in Berwyn Cicero you see some of the landscaping starting to take shape, and we're going to start on the north approach to Union Station there and more on Downers Grove Fairview. Okay. And along with those, in February of 2021, we start on the turntable installation that has been sitting there for 6 months waiting to be installed. But I'm glad it did, because it gave me a chance to redo that area. Now, I experimented with different ways to create chain link fence, and if you go back and look at some of my tips of the day, you'll see how I do chain link fence rather easily and rather inexpensively. It's basically piano wire and mesh ribbon. Alright, come over here and you see that the turntable is installed. And 9 of those tracks will be in the roundhouse, with another 5 outside the roundhouse. Down where the tanker is, that will eventually be the diesel fueling area. And just a few of my locomotives. Back where I'm at, that's the farm scene. You'll have cattle pen, a barn, and a grain silo and grain bin there. Some fenced in cattle areas, and then up into the pasture on the hill between the upper 2 tracks and the lower 2 tracks. There will be a drop-in section that you'll see eventually over that workbench with a suburban town scene. Here you get an overview. That's a pretty good shot of the overview as it existed back in February and March. Some trains around the land. Now you get a better idea how much glass on those 2 walls. And this was a patio, okay, and that's been enclosed, and it's semi-climate controlled. I do have a portable air conditioner down there under the benchwork at the far upper left. And you can see running some trains, uncoupling and running it onto the turntable, and maneuvering around. Went the wrong way the first time. And back and able to put the trains away in their different little sidings. And each one of those sidings is isolated with a separate switch to activate the power, because I don't like it to have engines that the lights are on, sitting there idling, etc. Plus, if you get a short or something, and if it travels down the track, I don't want to start blowing decoders. So it's just a lot safer if any place you park engines that you put an isolation switch in. All right, now you can see the north approach to Union Station there, where the switch tower is, has been completed. And along with the landscaping in Berwyn, Cicero, and the lighting. Some of the cars I've bought, vehicles, need a whole bunch more, but I got a fair representation now for my scenes. And I really like the forced perspective there on the Berwyn, Cicero backdrop. Now you can see the truncated roundhouse in place with its little backdrop that'll eventually have puff trees put around it, along with some other trees to help scene separation. And you can see where the farm scene is starting to pan out a little bit over there as well. Different E-units. You got the city, the Capital Limited just went by. Baltimore, Ohio's run from New York to Chicago. It competed with the Broadway Limited right there. Nope, that's not the Broadway Limited. That is the North Coast Limited, Northern Pacific's run that ran from Seattle to Minneapolis-St. Paul, and then the CB&Q would take it over and run it from Minneapolis-St. Paul into Chicago. Nope, that's still not the Broadway Limited. There's some Broadway Limited cars on there while I'm waiting to get the Broadway Limited finished. And I got real lucky on that. It's the fantasy CNP. Start seeing how some of the scenes are taking shape. You know, a little more details as time goes. You see the rock wall face sheets are in. They just still need to be painted and weathered. But Berwyn Cicero there looks really good. There we have a cab ride going through down to Fairview, through ultimately what will be the farm scene, and into Aurora and the roundhouse. Back around, there's the north approach to Union Station. This is taken from the car on the turntable. Another cab ride around Lockport Industrial District. Through Downers Grove Fairview with the Capital Limited going by. Some of the different scenes of Van Buren looking from Chicago Berwyn Cicero engine shed down through Van Buren Street Station. Yeah, I think back in March I was pulling that North Coast Limited with a Pennsylvania E9 unit. I hadn't gotten one, the F units for the Northern Pacific yet. Gives an idea of some of the different trains, and yes, I do like my passenger trains. And what I really like is the different liveries or road names. And they're not just all like modern day, everything's Amtrak. Okay? Modeling back in the 60s prior to the 71 merger, or 71 basic nationalization, for lack of a better term, of passenger service, you know, it gives far more, in my opinion, it gives far more interest due to the different trains and the different stories around each of those trains. Here I have a coal drag, Burlington coal drag going by. And what was nice about growing up in Downers Grove on the Burlington tracks, you had so many different road names from the Great Northern and Northern Pacific, along of course with the Burlington route going through there. So it made it very interesting what you were going to see next. You know, commuter trains, freight trains, all the different liveries on the passenger trains. So, yeah, in March I did a lot of rail fanning videos just because I had done so much in scenery that in between the different scenes and the different trains, to me, I still have a lot of different interest going on. By April, I had started on the scene separation between the west side of downtown Chicago and the east side of downtown Chicago. Okay, so I started lighting the Van Buren Street area. Got some more fronts in, and started on landscaping Aurora in the turntable and roundhouse. cab ride chasing the North Coast Limited. There I'm working on the farm scene, getting it ready. I've painted the plastic card, rock wall face, and buttresses. So they're all ready, and weathered them. They're all ready to go. Here's Van Buren Street Station and yard. So in May, I moved my main computer back out to the train room. This allowed me far more graphics capabilities, where I could have multiple cameras and switch from one camera to another, and basically have the capability now of following trains around the layout. Okay, which I find fun to do as well. As you can see there's multiple cameras, multiple sizes of the screens. The new touchscreen monitor folds away so that the drop-in area, which is underneath it with the town scene and the view back to the farm scene, are uninterrupted. Okay, you can see the workbench there, and you see the monitors folded away. Okay. And in June, I work on the lift-out section that fits into place above the workbench, or above the test tracks, programming tracks, etc. All right. I currently have 6 cameras. And I utilize, the software I utilize is Manycam, M-A-N-Y-C-A-M. And 5 years ago, I bought the upgraded version of it that has basically unlimited number of cameras you can use. You're only limited by the graphics capability of your computer. I'll have the Prudential building in there, which is a 50-story building. Back in the 60s, that was huge. Here I'm demonstrating the lighting for Van Buren, Grant Park, Lakeshore area. And here you see Buckingham Fountain down there, or my representation as such. I also started the JMRI series utilizing Decoder Pro to program your DCC chips on your locomotives, because it makes it so much easier to vary what are called CVs. You know, you can adjust the sounds, you can adjust the sound volumes, you can adjust momentum on the engines, etc. And you can see some of the JMRI in the background screens. I'm walking through the process there of adjusting or adding rolling stock into the operations menu. Okay, and there you get a view of the completed landscaping around the Aurora roundhouse and turntable, which I believe turned out really good. I'm really pleased with that. The upper screen is Van Buren Street area that I'm working on, you know, slow but sure. Multiple screens there available. As I talked about, I can follow trains around the layout on the video. And that's only 3 cameras there. Even better with 5. Lighting around in Aurora and on the farm scene. I think that's the first shot really of the completed farm pasture area anyway. Just to the left would be the silos and barn stock area. There's the Broadway Limited going by, along with the Capital Limited. Capital Limited and Broadway Limited. Both were trains that ran from New York to Chicago. Capital Limited ran down to DC first before coming west to Chicago, which made it longer, but to compete with that added time frame, the Baltimore, Ohio made it a luxury train with services not offered on other trains at the time, from barbers and beauty shop, just to name a couple. Our train of the month, now that we're in June, you get a feel for everything. We've seen how the retirement railroad has evolved over a year's time. The train of the month is the Union Pacific City of Los Angeles, which ran from Los Angeles, of course, to Chicago. Now, the interesting tidbit was Union Pacific's trackage stopped at Omaha. Okay? They had no trackage of their own east from Omaha to Chicago. What they did was pay for trackage rights on the Chicago Northwestern, okay, which gave them a line across central Iowa, north of Des Moines, through Ames, Iowa, home of my alma mater, Iowa State, and through Clinton, Iowa, on the Evanston subdivision, into the north ramp of Chicago's Union Station. Ultimately, the Union Pacific would buy the Chicago Northwestern, okay, and those became their own tracks. Now, there are two competing railroads between Chicago and Los Angeles. The other was Santa Fe's Super Chief, and it ran on a more southwesterly route down through Kansas City, and then southwest from there through New Mexico and Arizona and into Southern California. It's interesting that over time, all right, the Burlington and Chicago Northwestern were big competitors. Santa Fe and Union Pacific were big competitors. And over time, each merged, and now you have the BNSF competing with the Union Pacific. The Burlington also merged with the Great Northern and Northern Pacific. So they have routes. They've serviced the whole central portion of the United States, and they have routes up through the Northwest to Seattle from Chicago and routes southwest to LA. So it's very, very interesting to study the Western rail history. And here it's pulling in the Van Buren Street station. Now, in real life, it would have been pulling into the north ramp of Union Station. Okay, and we'll take another couple minutes and run around the layout on the city of Los Angeles at night. Give you a better feel for some of the lighting effects on the railroad. That's Downers Grove Fairview. Going through the farm scene. Come around Aurora. Back to the farm scene. Through the northern approach to Union Station. Bypassing Union Station on this video. Coming out the north or the south side of Union Station across the river into the Lockport Industrial District. As you see here. through to the Van Buren and Grant Park areas. Coming across the bridge, over the river. Underneath Grant Park. And now it's pulling into the Van Buren Street station. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this month's update and looking back on the first year of the retirement railroad and our train of the month, which I'm going to try to do for each of the months, and kind of give a flavor and some history of some of the more famous trains dating back into the 60s. All right, so anyway, again, I'm Steve. I want to thank you for joining me here on the Retirement Railroad monthly update, a year in review, and y'all have a great day. Bye now.